right?
I think that isn't there just come a point when Louisa May Alcott will be done to death and you need to get another writer, like, well, either the Bronte sisters, for example.
Well, I'll leave that for somebody else.
Oh, they're done. There's Jane Slayer and Wuthering Bites. So
Yeah, it's gone viral. I mean,
there's very little left.
Okay. In the red baseball cap, you had your hand up? Okay, you still want to jump in?
Two things about Joe and Laurie. Everybody that read that book wanted them to get together. But I think what was so amazing was that she was so wise to understand that even though he loved her terribly, and a lot of people, you marry a lot of people who love you terribly, even if you don't feel that way.
Yeah.
But she was wise enough to understand that the marriage wouldn't be suited to her.
Yeah.
I'm so cool with that. My problem is with Professor Bear being so boring. Like, fine, no, Laurie, that's totally cool, but can't we get someone a little better? And I understand he must have his fans, and I apologize to them.
Well, well.
Was she considered to be a pioneer in horror? Because I don't know other people at that time that are actually writing short stories in horror.
Yeah. It's hard to talk about her as being considered a pioneer in horror because nobody knew that she was doing it. You know, she was writing her stories very often under the name A.M. Barnard, and everyone thought that they were by a male author, and she studiously avoided acquiring any sort of public reputation as a horror writer. Later in her career, she contributed a short novel to a series called the No Name series, which was for charity. And the book was called A Modern Mephistopheles. It's an updating of the Faust legend. And she loved having a chance to go back and write a thriller because she had pretty much given them up after Little Women. Her principal motivation for writing the thrillers always was money. If you know anything about the Alcotts at all, you know that they were desperately poor constantly because Bronson was philosophically opposed or in fact incapable of holding down employment. And Louisa writes in her journals as a young woman as being poor as rats. So she really, pretty much, she once got an offer to write a column for a magazine, and she wrote in her diary, if I had been asked to write a Greek oration for $100, I would have done it. Okay. And yet, to return to, you had, what was your first question? Because I actually wanted to get in. Yeah. Louisa didn't want Joe to marry anybody. She wanted Joe to be a happy spinster, as she herself was. And you may know that Little Women came out in two parts. And the first one ends just as Meg has accepted the hand of young Mr. Brooke. And then part one concludes. Louisa and her publisher were then deluged with fan mail from young girls saying, we can't wait for part two when Joe marries Laurie. And Louisa had a fit. She said, absolutely not. I do not intend for Joe to be married. Deal's off. And her publisher said, look, we're selling this thing hand over fist. You'd better marry her to somebody. And so Louisa reluctantly came up with, actually, she called it a funny match with Professor Bear. But one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is the very strong feminist undercurrent of Little Women. And Louisa herself grew up in a family that called her Louie instead of Louisa because Louis was somewhat more masculine and Louisa was a tomboy. And you'll notice that the romantic pairing in part one that doesn't work out is Joe with the masculine name and Laurie with the feminine name. Right? Because Louisa was frustrated by gender roles and gender expectations, and wanted to push against them in any way that she acceptably could. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean that's all very much there.
And at that time that she was doing writing the thrillers, could she have let him publish if they knew it was a female?
Well, I think her publishers knew. But in fact, I know that to be true because we have correspondence discovered long after her death from publishers saying, we really liked your last one and send us more. It was from the editor of The Flag of Our Union. So in fact, the publishers were in on the secret. They didn't mind. They were doing well off of this stuff. But it would have been very hard for Louisa to identify herself as the author, not only because of the gender issue, but also because her family and her associates were people who very strongly believed that the written word should be used for edification and not just for sort of base, low entertainment. And you see that in Little Women, right? Through the professor who says, "I would not give this trash to the boys," right? Louisa loved writing the thrillers, but she also understood that she could not disgrace the people around her by connecting herself with them. Chris, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I have a question about this. Given the subtext of eroticism and homoeroticism in vampirism and werewolfery and all this gender stuff, doesn't that work in the mashup? Could there have been a homoerotic relationship?
There absolutely could have been, and I didn't think of it. But you know what? As I said, we've got, little men and Joe's boys. So, they seem very suited.
Yeah. And
Little men and little men.
Yeah, there you go. And littler men. Yeah. No, but if you want kinky, pick up Porter's book and see what she does with Beth. But okay.